And as the people who I steal my messages from are both sitting right here, I have to teach something that I know this week. And so, is there a Pokemon on me? Look right here, it's just talking. So I have to go with what I know, and what I know right now is bound up in Old Testament studies and biblical studies and beginner's Greek, so that's boring as hell. So I decided I was going to talk about living in the dark and not being in fear of it. Or in other words, deconstruction. And I'm going to just shoot from the hip tonight with a bunch of quotes from a guy that none of you probably know except for Brad. If the truth can make us free, as we also readily agree, it cannot do so without a deconstruction, which is a way of making or letting the truth happen. The truth is not the stuff of edifying hymns, rather it is dangerous, dirty, and smelly business. To seek the truth is to play with fire in a way to get burned. Not everyone has a stomach for it, above all those who say, Lord, Lord, and then head for cover the minute the Lord shows up dressed in rags and smelling like a street person. Be careful what you pray for. Lord, give me the truth, but not yet. The next time we look up to heaven and piously pray, come, Lord Jesus, we may find that he is already here, trying to get warm over an urban steam grate or trying to cross our borders. That's a guy named John Caputo. Please don't go read his stuff just yet. This term is getting thrown around. Baxter said it today that John comes in and deconstructs the vision of God in his gospel. Jesus deconstructs God. That quote is from a book called What Would Jesus Deconstruct? So it's starting to get thrown around more and more, and this isn't a new thing. It's just new in the non-academic world. I kind of view deconstruction as the equal and opposite and necessary reaction to fundamentalism in all its flavors. And as fundamentalism wants to come in and say, no, this, and this, we have to say, no, this doesn't work because. And this is the job of the person or the poor sap who takes on the job of deconstruction, because fundamentalism is the most violent thing on planet Earth. And it's not Islam, and it's not Westboro Baptist that are violent. It's fundamentalism that is violent. And when you combine that with arrogance and ignorance and tribalism, it's just going to go boom. So we can do ourselves a favor by deconstructing things and at least getting rid of the fundamentalism, because we are prone to fits of self-sufficiency and idolatry. And so whenever we find ourselves beginning to gather around the man Baxter Kruger and the amazing revelation that he has, and you can be sure that we need to begin our deconstructive process. Why? Because we're gathered around the man Baxter Kruger and the revelation that he's giving, and not the man Jesus Christ. And so we have to begin that process immediately. And the thing that the mimetic theory has taught me is that I learn, when I see Brad publish some other author, and I get a little bit of like tinge of jealousy, and then I'm like, okay, why is that bothering me? And I begin to deconstruct why that's bothering me. So this thing can be very, very healthy. Okay, it doesn't have to be a scary thing, even though at times it can be very scary to deconstruct things like the ground of our being. And so the moment we get there, which we're going to get to in just a few minutes, it begins to get very scary. And people begin to do things and make weird choices. And, you know, in this little camp we love, and I mean, I don't know where this came from, because nowhere in any dictionary that I can find is the definition of insanity doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. But like, people say that like it's fact all the time, and you won't find it anywhere. But I'm going to use that false definition. Is it AA? Okay, but it's not like in a dictionary. And they're like, this is the definition of insanity. And that's like saying, well, this Greek word, no, it doesn't mean that. So, okay, thank you. Having not ever overcome my drinking problem, I wouldn't know that. So if insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, then we can say the same thing about idolatry. It's worshiping the same God over and over again and expecting a different result. Okay? And so anytime we begin to idolize, I almost went off the track there. Anytime we begin to idolize anything, whether it's our own doctrine, ourselves, my image in the mirror, with I was going to say women, but they don't do that because they just degrade themselves all the time. So, my ministry. That's what it was for me. It was my stage. And so the second I began to deconstruct my stage, I realized, this isn't spiritual light, it's stage light, and it's very, very dark now. And so this is why I'm offering what I have to offer. I've been living there for a couple years. Nietzsche says there are no facts, only interpretations. And I'm only saying his name just to get the offense out there. But I like the line. Even as much as I don't totally agree with it. And then Caputo follows that up by saying to interpret is always a high wire act, balancing oneself on a line stretched across an abyss and in constant danger of constructing idols of its own imagining. The name of Jesus is too often a mirror in which we behold our own image, and it has always been easy to spot the sliver in the eye of the other and miss the 2x4 in our own. And so this is kind of where I come to the core of why we deconstruct, is that let's just talk about that little statement, for example. Jesus' statement of speck in your brother's eye versus the plank in your own eye is not a matter of you're full of crap and your brother's fine. It's all a matter of perspective. Because a small sliver in my eye seems like a plank to me. It's huge. It's like when you look at it like that, your finger's like, and artists know this kind of perspective. And that's the same thing. And I don't think we're ever meant to get the plank out of our own eye. And I don't think that it ever is going to come out. And that might not sit well with some of you, but don't take that as a sickness. I'm not saying you're going to die early. I'm not saying God has bad things for you. I'm saying that we all have a vision problem. And if any of us claim that we see clearly, we are lying. Because for now we see in a mirror dimly. We don't see clearly. We've got something in our eye. It ain't going to come out, so let's just work on us. So what we've done then, we've kind of, this is the story I'm going to tell, because this is what I did. I built a little house, and it was nice and pristine, and it had the grace message, and it had a little charismatic thing in it, and it had some good evangelical doctrine in it. It was a nice little house, and then it started to show some signs of wear. And so not only had I not finished the yard yet, but I had to start working on the house, and I got in there and I discovered that there was a hell of a lot of mold in the foundation, in the 2x4s, everywhere. So I had to start tearing things down. And that process revealed termites, and it revealed structural issues, and it revealed water damage and all kinds of things that I didn't expect to find under the grand facade that I had painted called grace. Because that's the big paint over, right? No matter how bad we are, no matter what we say, no matter how little integrity we have, grace is what we paint over it with. And we say, there, it's fine. Never mind the structural problems that are going on. Just keep painting layer after layer after layer, and it's going to fall. And so deconstruction helps us begin to take this thing apart before it collapses on us and kills us, which is where I was. The cracks that everyone else notices from the outside, but the church never notices from the inside because they're cracks because it's getting too big, they started to kind of show from the inside. He goes on, he says, having gotten used to the idea that the church defines and determines what Jesus stands for and what Jesus would do, the church is not going to see its authority threatened by anyone, not even Jesus. I'm just going to let that one sit for just a second. That one, it's highlighted, it's underlined, I have brackets, I have a little sticker on the book, this isn't important. Whoever defies the teachings of the church by definition stands accused of heresy, and that goes for Jesus. In short, were Jesus to return in the flesh, he would be executed again, not by the world, but by the church, or left by the church to die in the cold, or be shot down in the nightmare violence of America's urban warfare, or excluded as an illegal immigrant. Got real uncomfortable for a minute there, didn't it? Deconstruction does that. Because we like to say, yeah, amen, he'll be crucified again, but we don't like to say, yeah, amen, we'd probably kick him out of our country. And that's sad that that's a commentary that we have to address. I mean, if we don't get anything about grace, it should be that grace is totally inclusive. I mean, if I die and that's the only thing that people got out of what I said, amen, then I lived a good life. So when we get to removing these walls, it gets very messy and stuff starts to fall down and there's dust everywhere and you got to be like, man, this might be lead paint, so you want to be careful that you're not just throwing it because that's poisonous to other people. And there's going to be those that want to come alongside us, hey, can I help you? And yeah, you can help me tear down this wall. But just understand that there's going to come a time where it's going to get too scary for you. Because we're going to be in a level of my house that you don't want to be in. And then when we begin to blow out the floors, it gets really uneasy. Because that's where we're standing. And we're taking this stuff apart and we're chomping it up and we're trying to get rid of it because we realize that there's a lot of damage in this house and we don't want to live here anymore. And so we're tearing it all up and we're trying to get, and then oh crap. And it's the cartoon thing, you like tore everything out from you, straight down. Somehow they can pause in midair and then, whew. It's one of those. And Gabby still runs upstairs from the basement after she turns the light off when she's been down there and knows that there's nothing down there that's going to get her. I do too. Why? I have no idea. There's this inherent fear of the darkness of the basement that isn't finished, which is something like only Coloradoans get. Mississippi people are like, basement? And we get down into the basement, and it's terrifying, and it's dusty because we've been doing all this deconstruction, and it's hard to breathe. And that's usually when people check out, because they're not going to be breathing your crap in. And that's usually when we check out, too, because, well, they're gone, and I'm not going to go this alone, and so I have to follow them out. And then what we've left is this huge mess, and, foundation walls in a basement, and, nothing is there anymore. And if that's the only purpose of our deconstruction, then all we've done is destruction, and we need to go back into the house and stop being so afraid. And that darkness of the basement can be terrifying, and it can conjure up all kinds of monsters that are going to come gobble us. And if you had brothers like I had names for those monsters and what they looked like, what they smelled like, what they sounded like, and what they would say when they came to get me, which was one of the other brothers under the stairs coming to get me. So all that's in my mind. But sitting there and trying to let the dust settle, it's like watching paint dry, which I've been having to do for the last couple weeks too. And you just sit and you sit and you sit and any movement you make just stirs it up again. And if you want to, I'm going to sweep this stuff up, no, you're not, because the second you start sweeping it up, it's just going to stir, and then you have to sit again, and it takes even longer. So at that point, it's best for us to just go ahead, and this is what I had to do, is just sit in the dust and make it hard to breathe and hope to God that when the dust settled, one of your friends that was there while you were tearing down the walls came down with you. And you'll probably find, like I did, that no, they didn't. And that's not that they're bad people, it's just that that's your shit. And they're not going to do that. Okay? And then what happens is we begin, if we have the gumption and, we could call it the spirit if we're going to be religious about it, but the energy, or if we're just drunk enough to want to play with a jackhammer, we'll go after the foundation. And we'll begin to chisel that thing away. And that's the scariest part, because when you find out what's underneath the foundation, you find out if you've been worshiping a pile of bones or a living being. And when we get through that, I think, is when we finally start to become honest. Because everything else is just some external stuff that other people get to look at. It's like why we'll wash the outside of our car, but the inside looks like crap. Because all we care about is the stuff that other people can see. It's why I ironed my shirt and did my hair, and why my wife always looks so pretty when we go out in public. and at home, but I'm just saying. Because we care about what other people see. And that's fine to a point. But at the point that how we care becomes an idol to us, and especially in the realm of our religion, we owe it to ourselves to begin to deconstruct that thing. Because if it can't be deconstructed, it's God. I could venture a guess that none of us have built the perfect house that can't be deconstructed. And if we're just afraid to do it, then we don't really have faith. We're just afraid to deconstruct. And so what we are then is comfortable. We're not believers. And I'll be honest, I found underneath that there wasn't a Jesus that looked anything like the Jesus in the Bible. It was a Jesus that needed Paul to complete his message. And he was very weak and he had nothing to say of his own. That's what I found when I deconstructed. At the heart of my belief that it was more of a metaphysical Jesus that had no flesh and blood. I like that word panentheism, that God fills all things, but God, in the tree, not the tree, in you and I, but you and I are not God. And I think deconstruction helps us keep from closing our hand around God and proclaiming, I've got it. I mean, really? I've got it. I played golf with a guy one time who said, I think I've about got this game figured out. I mean, right? I sold my clubs last year because I was hemorrhaging money trying to figure it out. It's like, you don't, I've got God. No, you don't. So in the end of all this stuff that I call deconstruction, that there's different words for, apophasis, phasis, however you say that one. We kind of find ourselves sitting absolutely alone and in the dark. And that's not a real amen warranting statement. It's like, here's your promise of the gospel. You will have tribulation. I mean, if that was the only thing that got recorded, would you still follow Jesus? If that was the only promise that he ever gave that got recorded, would you still follow him? Probably not. Most people like the good stuff. They don't want that. You're going to have problems, and when these problems come, you're going to need to know how to address them. Most problems can be thoroughly deconstructed. For me, a lot of times, it's a matter of statistics. Most airplanes don't crash. I tell myself as I am clammy and sweating as we're taking off. And even on some that do, most of the people don't die. It's a very small percentage of people who die in airplane crashes. Almost convinces me when I'm taking off that I have nothing to be afraid of. Until my wife goes, yeah, but what if this is one of those ones? And then we land and we laugh just about every time. But that fear becomes an idol in that moment because it takes control of me and it makes my worship directed at it. And so that fear then needs to be deconstructed too. And so this is a never-ending process. This is something that, I don't know. I can't tell you the end of it because I'm still sitting down in the bottom, below the basement, in an area that's dark enough that the only kind of light that can get in is real light. I told Josh, I grabbed at something a few weeks ago, but I realized it was bat crap. It wasn't light. I was like, dang it, that was the wrong thing. And so it's in those moments, though. I think Lindsay, were you the one that told me about, yes. When you're in these moments of utter blindness, and the darkness is blinding, okay? It's not just dark. It's not like there's some street lights, and when you deconstruct everything that you are, you're left with nothing. And that's where you start to find real light. Because the tiniest little thing can shine. And the whole room is lit. I mean, that's the whole, I think when I wrote Light of the World originally, I like had this really religious notion that this is what it's about. But I think like something inside me was saying, no, this is what I want. And so like now I got to change the lyrics because some of them don't match that. So simply put, and you're going to be out of here early because this is my last statement, we deconstruct whenever we do not appear before our God in a better light than our children do before us.